In a rapidly evolving global economic landscape, the actions of China's President Xi Jinping may pose the most significant threat to international stability, overshadowing even the contentious tariffs imposed by former U.S. President Donald Trump. This assertion comes from Brad Setzer, a former Treasury official who contends that Xi's strategic industrial policies are fundamentally distorting global trade dynamics in a way that could have dire consequences. Setzer's analysis, articulated in a recent op-ed, highlights a stark imbalance in trade flows between China and its international partners. While China's exports have surged by over $150 billion in recent years, imports of manufactured goods have stagnated, increasing by only $15 billion annually, suggesting a troubling one-way street in trade relations. This disparity is particularly detrimental to economies heavily reliant on exports such as Germany and Japan, which find their markets increasingly saturated with Chinese goods. The roots of this imbalance can be traced back to China's failure to recalibrate its economy following the global financial crisis. Instead of pivoting towards consumer-driven growth, the Chinese government continued to invest heavily in infrastructure and real estate, only to subsequently impose restrictions that led to a significant economic slowdown. During the pandemic, while many nations directed stimulus funds to bolster consumer spending, China opted to support its manufacturing sector, resulting in overproduction that outpaced domestic demand. Setzer points out that China now commands a staggering two-thirds of the global demand for automobiles and dominates the production of essential materials such as steel and aluminum. This creates a precarious situation where countries dependent on Chinese goods find themselves vulnerable to economic coercion from Beijing. Setzer warns. This points to a world economy in which China has no need for the industrial inputs of other countries while leaving those countries dependent on Chinese-made goods. Trump's tariffs, which were designed to counteract China's trade practices, may exacerbate the situation rather than alleviate it. Setzer argues that the unpredictability associated with Trump's trade policy creates further uncertainty, hindering businesses' ability to adapt to the shifting landscape. His administration has already threatened to extend tariffs to European goods, further straining international relations. Analysts are increasingly concerned about the ramifications of China's overcapacity and its preference for manufacturing over consumer support. Zongyuan Zoilu, a scholar at the Council on Foreign Relations, warns that China is producing far more output than it or foreign markets can sustainably absorb, paving the way for potential economic instability within the country itself. On the domestic front, Xi Jinping has recently made overtures to the private sector, attempting to mend relations that have been strained by a series of regulatory crackdowns. In a rare meeting with prominent business leaders, including Alibaba's Jack Ma, Xi promised to unwaveringly encourage private enterprises. While this may signal a thaw in relations, experts caution that mere rhetoric will not suffice to restore investor confidence, which has been severely undermined by years of policy uncertainty and interventionism. As the global economy navigates these turbulent waters, the interplay between U.S. tariffs and China's industrial policies will be critical to watch. With concerns mounting over a potential new trade war and the ongoing geopolitical tensions, the need for a balanced approach that fosters collaboration rather than confrontation is more pressing than ever. In conclusion, as the world braces for future developments, the economic strategies employed by both Xi Jinping and Trump will significantly influence not only their respective nations but the global economic order as a whole. The focus must shift toward establishing stable, predictable trade relations that benefit all parties involved, lest we find ourselves in a cycle of retaliatory measures and economic isolation that could stifle growth and innovation on a global scale. In the rapidly shifting landscape of global trade, few leaders are under more scrutiny than China's President Xi Jinping. Recent analyses suggest that Xi's economic strategies may pose a significant threat to the global economy, potentially overshadowing the impacts of U.S. tariffs implemented by former President Donald Trump. Brad Setzer, a former Treasury official and currently a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, articulates this perspective, emphasizing that China's aggressive manufacturing and export policies are fundamentally altering the dynamics of international trade. Setzer notes that while Trump's tariffs have introduced a level of unpredictability into U.S. trade relations, Xi's calculated economic maneuvers are creating more profound distortions in the global market. Mr. Xi has a one-way vision of trade, Setzer asserts, indicating that China's export-driven economy is leading to imbalances that leave other nations vulnerable. Over the past 6 years, China's export growth has skyrocketed, contrasting starkly with the stagnation of its manufactured goods imports. This shift has not only affected China's trade partners but has also raised concerns among economies reliant on exports, such as Germany and Japan. The underlying causes of this phenomenon can be traced back to China's reluctance to transition its economy away from investment and trade following the global financial crisis. Instead of focusing on consumer demand, Beijing has prioritized support for its manufacturing sector. This has resulted in an overproduction dilemma, with China now capable of fulfilling 2/3 of the world's car demand and producing over half of its steel and aluminum supply. As Setzer warns, this dependence on Chinese goods creates a precarious situation where other countries may find themselves at the mercy of Beijing's economic policies. Adding to the complexity of this situation, Xi's administration has shown a readiness to retaliate against tariffs imposed by the United States. The Chinese government has already initiated reciprocal tariffs on U.S. coal and liquefied natural gas, reflecting a more assertive stance than during Trump's initial trade war. This strategic pivot is framed within the context of Xi's broader ambitions for China to ascend as a leader in high-tech industries, a goal emphasized during a recent meeting with heads of prominent Chinese tech firms. Furthermore, the rise of Chinese companies like BYD in the electric vehicle market and the introduction of innovative technologies like the AI tool DeepSeek demonstrate China's capability to compete effectively on the global stage even amid heightened tensions with the U.S. The price advantage of Chinese products, particularly in the EV sector, poses a significant challenge to American companies struggling with reputational issues and higher costs. As the world watches these developments unfold, the intricate web of trade relationships is likely to evolve further. Xi's approach and the lessons learned from past confrontations with the U.S. suggest a potentially more resilient China, one that is better equipped to navigate the turbulent waters of international trade. The implications of these dynamics will extend beyond economics, potentially reshaping geopolitical alliances and influencing global stability. Looking ahead, the interplay between Xi's industrial strategies and Trump's trade policies will be pivotal in determining the future landscape of global trade. As both leaders pursue their respective agendas, the consequences could redefine economic relationships and power structures worldwide. The question remains, will this new chapter in Sino-American relations lead to a more balanced global economy, or will it exacerbate existing tensions, resulting in a fractured international trade system? The global economy finds itself at a precarious juncture, with increasing alarms being raised about the potential repercussions of China's economic policies under President Xi Jinping. In recent commentary, former Treasury official Brad Setzer has underscored the notion that Xi's strategic focus on manufacturing and trade poses a significant threat that may eclipse the chaos wrought by President Donald Trump's tariffs. Setzer, a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations and a former deputy assistant secretary at the Treasury Department, articulated these concerns in a New York Times op-ed, arguing that the dynamics of trade flows could fundamentally reshape the global economic landscape. Setzer's analysis reveals a stark disparity in trade dynamics. Over the past 6 years, China's imports of manufactured goods have stagnated at a mere average increase of $15 billion annually, while its exports have surged by over $150 billion. When it comes to manufactured goods, trade with China is virtually a one-way street, Setzer observed, highlighting how this imbalance is particularly detrimental to export-driven economies such as Germany and Japan. This situation is symptomatic of China's broader economic strategy, which has yet to pivot away from a heavy reliance on investment and exports in the wake of the global financial crisis. The roots of this issue trace back to China's failure to rebalance its economy, instead opting for a real estate and infrastructure boom. As fears of an economic bubble grew, Xi's government clamped down on this growth, leading to a slowdown from which the economy has not fully recovered. Unlike many nations that opted for consumer-focused stimulus during the pandemic, China directed its support toward manufacturers, resulting in overproduction that the domestic market could not absorb. Setzer warns that as it stands, China alone possesses the capacity to fulfill two-thirds of the world's automotive demand and produces more than half of the global steel, aluminum, and shipping supplies. With China's exports growing 3 times faster than global trade overall, Setzer argues that this places countries in a vulnerable position reliant on Chinese goods while simultaneously facing the risk of economic and political pressures from Beijing. Trump's tariffs, while intended to counteract these imbalances, could inadvertently exacerbate the situation. Setzer argues that the unpredictability of U.S. trade policy is hindering businesses' ability to plan effectively, thereby complicating the trade landscape further. The potential for retaliatory tariffs against additional trading partners, including Europe, only adds to the uncertainty. Mr. Xi has a one-way vision of trade. Mr. Trump often sounds as if he doesn't believe in any trade, Setzer noted, suggesting that the interplay between these two leaders could lead the global economy into turbulent waters. Echoing Setzer's sentiments, other experts have raised concerns about the long-term sustainability of China's manufacturing-centric approach. Zhong Yu and Zoe Liu, a scholar at the Council on Foreign Relations, highlighted that the overproduction in critical sectors could lead China into a cycle of deflation, insolvency, and job losses if domestic demand does not improve. In the broader context, the shifting geopolitical landscape has prompted countries like Malaysia to strengthen their economic ties, as Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim recently announced visits from Xi Jinping and African leaders aimed at enhancing trade relations. Anwar emphasized the need for Malaysia to embrace advancements in technology, artificial intelligence, and digitalization to remain competitive on the global stage. As the world navigates this complex economic environment, the interplay of Xi Jinping's industrial policies and Trump's unpredictable trade strategies will be pivotal in shaping future developments. The unfolding scenario suggests that careful navigation will be essential to mitigate risks and harness opportunities in a rapidly changing global economy. In an era marked by rapid technological advancements and an increasingly interconnected world, the battle over freedom of expression and information has taken center stage. Recent developments highlight the urgent need for the United States to safeguard vital information from adversarial nations, particularly China, as censorship infiltrates various facets of media and entertainment. One of the most striking examples of this censorship can be seen in the gaming industry. Marvel Rivals, an immensely popular video game developed by the Chinese company NetEase Games, has come under scrutiny for its content moderation policies. Despite being based on an iconic American franchise, players discovered that phrases such as Free Hong Kong and Tiananmen Square were prohibited in the game's chat feature. This raises critical questions about the influence of Chinese censorship on media consumed by American audiences. As German Lopez notes in the New York Times, video games are not just sources of entertainment, they are also social platforms, and the implications of such censorship extend far beyond mere gameplay. This situation reflects a broader trend in which Western developers must navigate the complex landscape of Chinese regulations to access the lucrative Chinese market. Historically, censorship was primarily confined to Chinese versions of Western games. However, as Chinese developers gain prominence on the global stage, they bring with them the same stringent censorship practices. The success of titles like Black Myth, Wukong, which garnered international acclaim, further illustrates the potential for Chinese censorship to seep into Western gaming culture. Lopez explains that while players can still voice support for causes outside of China, such as Free Palestine or Free Kashmir, expressing sentiments related to China is met with immediate restrictions. This selective censorship not only limits free speech but also highlights the dual standards in how different geopolitical issues are treated within the gaming community. The ramifications of this censorship are significant as it shapes the narratives and discourses that young players engage with daily. As the Chinese Communist Party CCP continues to tighten its grip on free expression, the international community is taking heed. A recent report by Human Rights Watch details the systemic abuses perpetrated by the Chinese government throughout 2024, noting a disturbing trend of increased censorship and repression of dissent. Maya Wang, the organization's associate director for China, emphasized, "The Chinese government has further tightened abusive laws and imprisoned critics and rights defenders while making it increasingly difficult to report on government abuses throughout the country." The report highlights alarming instances of arbitrary detention, suppression of religious freedoms, and the silencing of voices advocating for cultural preservation. For example, the case of a Tibetan village chief who died shortly after his release from prison underscores the dire consequences of challenging the CCP's narrative. The international response has been to strengthen sanctions and legislation aimed at holding the Chinese government accountable, such as the United States Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. In the face of such oppressive tactics, the question remains, how can the U.S. protect vital information and promote free expression in an era where foreign influence permeates domestic media? The responsibility lies not only with government entities but also with private corporations that must evaluate their roles in perpetuating or challenging censorship. As the landscape evolves, it is essential for stakeholders to remain vigilant and proactive. The intersection of technology, entertainment, and politics will continue to evolve, and how the U.S. addresses these challenges will shape the future of free expression both domestically and internationally. The coming years will likely see increased scrutiny of corporate practices regarding censorship and a renewed commitment to protecting the right to free speech in all its forms. In recent weeks, China's approach to international policing and diplomatic strategies has drawn attention as the nation seeks to expand its influence in the developing world. A series of high-profile operations, including the rescue of Chinese nationals from online scam centers in Myanmar and police training programs in the Solomon Islands, have sparked discussions about the implications of China's growing engagement in global law enforcement and the potential scrutiny it may attract. On February 23, 2025, the Chinese Ministry of Public Security announced the repatriation of 200 Chinese citizens rescued from a human trafficking and online scam operation in Myanmar. This operation, orchestrated by Liu Zhongyi, China's Assistant Minister for Public Security, followed several visits to Southeast Asia aimed at combating cyber fraud, an issue fraught with allegations of human rights abuses. Liu's efforts underscore a broader strategy wherein China positions itself as a protector of its citizens overseas while simultaneously asserting its influence in the region. As Liu coordinated these efforts approximately 8,000 kilometers away in the Solomon Islands, Chinese liaison officers concluded a police training program for local law enforcement. This training, which covered vital topics such as DNA evidence identification and telecom fraud investigation, is part of a mechanism initiated in 2022 to enhance police capabilities in the archipelago. The Chinese embassy in Honiara reported that 30 local officers participated in the program, which aims to bolster local security forces amid regional instability. China's increasing focus on police diplomacy aligns with its status as the world's second-largest economy and a significant player in international investment in tourism. By taking a proactive role in law enforcement training and operations abroad, China not only aims to safeguard its citizens but also to cultivate a reputation as a reliable security partner in developing countries. However, experts caution that this approach could lead to heightened scrutiny from the international community. A China-based analyst noted that while these initiatives may improve China's image in some regions, they also raise concerns about the potential for overreach and human rights violations. In the backdrop of these activities, China continues to grapple with complex geopolitical dynamics, particularly in relation to its strategic partnerships. The recent deepening of ties between India and the United States under the Indo-Pacific strategy has compelled Pakistan and China to reaffirm their alliance. Pakistani President Asif Ali Zardari's recent visit to China aimed to strengthen this partnership, highlighting the enduring significance of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor (CPC) despite security challenges. Notably, A study indicated a 73% surge in terrorist activities in Pakistan since the Taliban regained power in Afghanistan, further complicating the regional security landscape. Amid these developments, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi emphasized the importance of upholding the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence during a recent G20 foreign ministers meeting in South Africa. He called for G20 members to act as guardians of world peace and to prioritize dialogue over confrontation. This stance reflects China's broader diplomatic vision, which seeks to promote multilateralism and cooperative security in an increasingly fragmented global order. As China navigates its dual role as a facilitator of international security and a participant in regional geopolitics, the implications of its police diplomacy will likely continue to unfold. The nation's efforts to project power through law enforcement partnerships may serve to enhance its influence. But they also invite scrutiny regarding human rights practices and the potential for geopolitical tensions. Looking ahead, it will be critical to observe how China balances its interests with the growing expectations of the international community, particularly as it seeks to assert itself as a leader in global security matters.